Welcome to the Health Revolution, the show that leads you to a life of vibrant well-being. In a world full of noisy health trends, we bring you clarity through a sea of fads. We reveal the science behind the strategies that truly work. We explore physical strength, emotional resilience, and mental mastery, the keys to an enriched life. See inspiring interviews with the champions who've conquered life's health challenges. Are you ready to unlock your potential to live with vitality and purpose? Then join the Health Revolution. I'm your host, Adriana Morrison, health and fitness expert, speaker, and a mom who understands. Let's embark on this transformative quest together. If you want to change the game, it all starts now. Welcome, everybody. You are watching the Health Revolution, and we're excited that you're joining us today. I'm your host, Adriana Morrison. No matter which way you're tuning into us, do not forget to hit the subscribe button. We want to stay connected to you. Also, at the bottom of your screen, there is a tab for show episode notes. Be very mindful of that because there is important information about today's episode that you can count on that is there. Now, we want to welcome all new and returning viewers to our show. We are excited to have the conversations that really elevate, optimize life and well-being, elevating the physical strength of the human body, emotional resilience, and mental mastery. Sometimes we talk about one particular subtopic. Sometimes we talk about a combination of all of that. And today is one of those combo days. Today we are going to meet a man who is the example of resilience. He is that story of the comeback that we all like to see, learn from, and cheer on as well. So first, before we dive deep into it, let's get to know him. Watch this. Meet Nick Volinchak, a speaker, entrepreneur, and storyteller whose life is a living testament to the power of perseverance. After losing his mother at a young age, Nick spiraled into addiction and homelessness by just 21 years old. But everything changed with a single act of compassion at a local rescue mission, a moment that became the spark for a total life transformation. From rock bottom to rising up, Nick clawed his way forward, one microshift at a time. He went back to school, earned his degree, and became a devoted husband and father, co-founding a thriving digital marketing agency. Today, we'll learn what it really takes to rebuild your life from the inside out, not with grand gestures, but with daily grit, emotional honesty, and a vision for something more. Nick Volinchak, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Adriana. And before we get started today, I have one question to ask you.
What's that?
Is Nick Volinchak looking good today or what?
Yes, he is. I mean, the color is popping, and you are such a great example of what it means to shine. So appreciate your time being here. And I want to dive right into it. You've got quite this story of just going through rock bottom and coming back out from the top. So talk to us who was Nick prior to that moment where everything changed, and how has your life been so far?
Well, Nick was relatively normal for about 8 years until we got a very quick and devastating diagnosis for my mother, where in May she had gotten a hysterectomy in 1992. And at the time they had to do invasive procedures to make sure you were healthy enough to do it. And she had full clean bill of health. And fast forward to just after Labor Day that year, and we had just gotten back from vacation and she couldn't get up to walk, and took her to the emergency room. And by that night, we had a terminal diagnosis that she was not going to make it, past a few more months. And she ended up passing on October 25th, 1992. And life was never the same. I mean, for obvious reasons, right? A kid at that age loses his mother. And my father, who had been a beacon of strength, a big guy, not as big as me. I tell him that all the time now. But one of my earliest memories is sitting on our bed with the priest telling me I had to step up and kind of help my dad take care of my brother and sister. And my dad is just bawling his eyes out, things you never want to have to see a parent do. And he was physically and emotionally abusive after that, which made growing up more difficult. I was very lucky to have a group of aunts, grandparents, and cousins that kind of filled the role of my mother, but no one ever actually fills that role of your mother. Surprisingly, up until the point I was about 14, I kept it on the straight and narrow. Excellent at school, had interest, professional wrestling, sports. I was a young entrepreneur. I always had various things going on that I was trying to do. And then I remember probably some point early in my sophomore year as the American Pie movies are coming out, and I'm looking at the visual of what, hey, this is what high school is supposed to look like. And I look around at what I'm doing in the basement of my friend's house, 7 or 8 of us dudes playing GoldenEye on N64, and just feeling like, well, this isn't what I see up there. And I don't want to go my whole high school life not experiencing that. So cut my hair. I had a bowl cut at the time. Don't hold that against me, please, anybody out there. Cut my hair, got new clothes, kind of tried to start hanging around with a new crowd, and it worked. And before long, I was going to every party, huge Rolodex of friends that I could, get into mischief with. Alcohol became trying to smoke weed. Trying to smoke weed became, Xanax, became cocaine, became Vicodin, became Percocet. And then one morning I woke up and I needed to do drugs in order to manage my day. And it had become the only thing that I knew. And unfortunately, at that time, I was introduced to a substance called Oxycontin, which in the early 2000s was a massive epidemic because they didn't know or care, one of the two, about what the residual effects of just dosing these people would have. And not only that, but the infrastructure around prescription drugs was nowhere near what we had now. So it was very easy to go to a crooked doctor, get a prescription, go to multiple crooked doctors, get multiple prescriptions, drive to different pharmacies and get those cashed in. So I bottomed out really quick, was stealing from people, robbing my family, just a total degenerate, been in jail numbers of times, been arrested probably 10 times more than the amount I'd been to jail. And then it all kind of crescendoed on my 21st ish birthday, where I moved back in my dad's house to try to get clean. And I ended up just robbing him. And I woke up one morning with the police and a restraining order hanging over me, escorted out of my house. Now I'm living in my car. I made a half attempt at trying to take my own life because I was not capable of doing it in a violent way. So what I wanted to try to do was take a long straightaway in Canfield very fast and whip it into a corner. And I did. When the car got off the ground, I felt completely free for the first time in my life. And I thought that was going to be the end of it, but physics prevailed. And I hit the tree with my car in such a manner that it was like an equal distribution of, like impact on 3 or 4 different trees. So the car kind of just slid down the trees. And in all of this, I never took my foot off the gas. So it just shot out of the ditch. And I remember just sitting there shaking, facing the opposite way that I'd come from. And you would think that would be your like wake up moment, but it wasn't. I left, went to go get high. And then I just started experiencing like what I call my microshifts, which were these little conversations that for the first time in my life, like impacted me. I ran out of gas. Some strangers ended up pulling over after me sitting there for 15 minutes. And on the ride to go get gas, to take me to my dad's so that he would give me money or take me to get gas, they actually conversed with me. And when I say that to people, people don't quite understand. When you're a drug addict, you don't really have meaningful conversation. It's all fixation on the next hit. When I went to get out of their car, the wife grabbed me by my arm and said, "Listen, we love you. You can still do this. You're strong enough." And at the time, again, didn't care, need to go get gas, need to go get high. But that night when I was in Walmart's parking lot trying to sleep, it's all I could think about. All I could think about was a stranger saw something in me and felt like that there was still a chance for me. And I continued to get into trouble, did a bunch of stupid things. Ultimately, without going into the grotesque details, ended up getting pulled over a few weeks later. And the cop, I mean, I had an expired license. I had an SR22 bond, which meant, I was supposed to have an SR22 bond. I had no insurance. The cop should have thrown me probably in jail or worse, but he noticed that I had a bunch of bags in my back seat. And when he came up to the window, it wasn't the normal conversation I had with police. It was someone who had general concern for my well being. And that night, he asked me if I had a place to go. And I said, no, I mean, I have no one, no place, nothing I can do. And so he called the rescue mission and they had a bed for me there. And when I showed up, there was a little Italian guy named Frank Romandetti working the front desk. And when he came to get me, he was short, stout, burly. He looked like a grizzly bear. And he looked like he just had utter contempt and disdain for me in his heart. And he asked me, how old are you? 21. Where are you from? Canfield. Now, Canfield is an upper middle class area of Youngstown. People from Canfield don't end up at the local homeless shelter. And he said something to me that really finally hit it for me. What are you doing at 21 years old from Canfield that you're at the rescue mission of Mahoning Valley? And Adriana, at that point, my eyes opened up and I realized that I had hit the point where I finally had to take control of my life again.
And quite the turn of events, how things were leading one to the other. Talk us through, so when you get there, you're at the rescue mission and they take you in. And what was the feeling that you had that they embraced you? He may have asked you a poignant question where it sat with you, but what was it like for you to enter this chapter in your life?
It felt like everything was finally lining up to where I could get away from the thing I had been doing, because I think a lot of addicts go through this like bell curve where they start off and it's innocent enough and then they're in their full-blown addiction and you kind of like it because it's fun, you're doing crazy stuff, you're having a good time, but then you start to kind of like fall down that hill where you're like, what is my life becoming? But you're addicted to something and you can't afford the mental capacity to sit and think about that. So it put me in a position where I finally had to sit and think about all that I have done. And a lot of it wasn't even like what I had done to myself, but having to cope with the realization of what I had done to so many people who really just wanted to see the best for me, my friends, my family. So it was a very humbling experience, and one that really put me face to face with myself and understanding that I finally have to get up and do something about what I'm trying to accomplish in life.
Sometimes people will adopt either patterns of behavior, addictions, because of things that they just have a hard time coping with, and they choose different ways of coping. When you look back at that chapter in your life, what would you say was the biggest hurdle for you that you just could not work through or navigate through?
It's really weird to say, but I really honestly think it was just I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. I didn't know where I fit in. It was hard to make friends. It was hard to socialize. And I went from a 12-person Catholic school to a 260-person, middle school, knowing nobody there, looking different. And it's in everyone's going through puberty. So no one was really nice. No one was welcoming. Everyone was just kind of like truthfully standoffish. And I noticed that it wasn't an experience that other people who were just coming to the school were having. So then you start to internalize things and ask yourself, well, what is so bad about me that these people are willing to welcome other people, but not welcome me? And so it was a very disheartening experience for me. And I don't think it was their fault. I think I just didn't know how to socialize. I had been around the same people for, the better part of 10 years for that point and didn't know anyone from outside of that social circle. So I think that really, kind of pushed me in that direction. It wasn't, oh, my mom died or my dad was abused. It was really just like, I don't know how to live and exist because no one has ever told me this is how you try to exist and operate in life.
Do you think that part of it did come from the fact that your mom had died, and that your dad in his level of coping and being there for you and your siblings, or maybe that he was struggling where he was, that had maybe a bigger impact than anyone could picture back then?
It's one of those things that, you don't go through those traumatic situations in your life and have them impact you, right? It is an absolute that had something to do with it. But I don't think those were the main factors, because I managed, 8 years, 6 to 8 years where I was like happy where I was at. And it was just really when I switched, schools and had to adapt to like not just a new school, but an entirely different culture than I was used to.
So you stayed at the rescue mission, how long for?
About a year.
Okay. And what was that year like as you were sorting the next chapter? Did you felt like you were trusting the process? Did you feel like you were grappling with those internal issues that you had?
Yeah, you absolutely are trying to put on a face of figuring out your future and dealing with the problems that you've caused, but the pile of problems ends up being really, really, really big when you've done it for 5 or 6 years. And to be fair and honest, I was one of the lucky ones, because most of the people that I had met during my inevitable 10 years of living and working at the mission had decades worth of trauma that they had to try to unpack. But for me, it was also a situation where I didn't understand that saying I'm sorry meant that the other person or people would say, I forgive you, and everything would go back to normal. I think I was a little naive in thinking that, like, if I went here and I was doing well for a few months or for a year or whatever it might be, everything that I did in the past would suddenly be washed away and we'd go back to normalcy. And I found most of the people in my life that I had harmed didn't really have time for me still. They were happy that I was doing the right thing, but there was still a huge amount of distrust and broken relationships, some to the point where we have never mended fences.
Why do you think you stand out as succeeding when life just really was rock bottom for you? What made the difference for you?
That is a very powerful question. And I think for me, it was just I've always been combative. I've always been the type of person who you can never say, you can't do that. If you tell me you could have a trunk full of groceries and you can tell me you can't get that in one trip, make multiple trips. And I'm gonna say, nope, there's no shot I'm taking this all in at one time, because I don't like to be told I couldn't do something. And there were a lot of people, surprisingly, that were like at the mission and outside of the mission, that were like, good on you for trying to get yourself together, but we know you're not going to be able to do what's required because of the structure that's required and how much you'll have to do things that you don't want to do, knowing that I was a creature of only doing what I wanted to do. So part of it was spite, where I was like, oh, I'm going to prove all these people wrong, and I'm going to prove that I can do it and I will be able to make something of myself, and nobody is going to limit what I'm able to do. And so it was kind of one of those things where I ended up succeeding, probably with the wrong motivation, but it did kind of straighten itself out as time went on, and I stopped doing things a little bit out of spite and did it for more altruistic and less harmful reasons.
We've got more to cover, and quite the story that Nick has. First, we're going to take a break. Stay right there.
So in the calm bag, it has GABA, theanine, and taurine. So theanine, which is B1, which is also in our B complex, but it also helps with the stress response levels. It also helps with the neurological transmitters in our brain. Combined with the GABA, and then you add taurine to it. Taurine is a non-essential amino acid in our body, but it's found in our heart, our brain, and our eyes. So in my personal opinion, it's very essential in our lives. But taurine has a calming effect as well. When I was battling all my AFib issues, I was taking high doses of taurine because that would help with my AFib. It would help with the palpitations I was having. And it also helped with the anxiety of having the palpitations because I knew what was going on. And so taurine helps a lot with that as well. So those three together create such a wonderful concoction that really calms people down.
Introducing Launchpad, the perfect partner to help you launch your dream project to the world. We know that time is of the essence, and we're here to help you make the most of it. With Launchpad, you'll get access to the most advanced digital tools and strategies to take your idea from a mere concept to a fully fledged success. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or a seasoned pro, we have everything you need to make your mark in the world. Launchpad, your ultimate launch partner.
Welcome back, everybody. We are spending quality time with our guest today, Nick Volinchak. He is a resilient story of overcoming addiction and being able to persevere and soar in the following chapters in his life. So, Nick, after you were working at the rescue mission, I'm intrigued about the fact that there was a point where you stepped away after you had been there and you had wanted to give back. Can you talk a little bit more about that, what that transition was like, how you knew you needed to use your voice in a different way versus staying with the rescue mission?
Yeah, I mean, when I realized I needed to get away from the rescue mission, it was just it was mounting pressure. I don't think they bluntly told me at one point that I never got promoted because they were just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And again, it was very similar to like how I felt when I went from a Catholic school to Campfield High School, where I'm sitting here and saying like, I've done all the right things. I've worked so hard in my life. I've impacted other people's lives, and you're still sitting here telling me that there's something about me that makes you feel like I'm going to jump right back into drugs. And this was like 5 or 6 years, maybe even 7 years after I had been clean and worked there and never relapsed, lived with a wife who was actively smoking crack and shooting heroin and never once erred from the path. And so at that point, I remember telling the director of operations, who happened to be my father-in-law, I'm like, you guys are terrible. This is absolutely ridiculous that I've wasted this much of my life with you. I'll do it over and over again for the people who came through those doors, because I was one of those people. And so as soon as I got the opportunity to get out and do a accounting related job, which was what my background was in, and it took a long time. And again, that was another stressful, like, my God, is anything ever going to break right for me? Because I was a little bit older. Well, they didn't want a 30-year-old, to intern for them. We want someone who's 20, because if they stay with us, we have 10 more years of usable life from them. So it was very difficult. And I interviewed with the top accounting firms, always moved to the final round, but was never able to actually get into the position to, move ahead. And it finally, luckily, I managed to find a accounting adjacent position. And that's when I was never happier in my life to be able to walk in the office and just say, I quit. I'm done. I will see you later.
The portion, and I didn't know this, that your father-in-law was the executive director of the
He
rescue.
was like, I think he had gotten up to director of client services, maybe even director of operations. It's been a long enough. He was like the layer right below executive director.
So that adds a different family dynamic to things because but you still grew your voice. So what helped you do so? Because that complicates things a little bit.
Yeah, you want to know what helped me grow my voice was living with an active addict and watching how I used to be and dealing with the torment that I know that I had to be putting my family through and my friends through. And initially, for the first few years, it was like I committed to this. I feel like it's the right thing to do to stick with it. And then before long, it was like, oh my goodness, this is what am I like? I am just falling back into old habits because this is easy. I'm complacent. It's going to be too hard to get out of this circumstance. So I really had to work hard to find my voice to finally be like, no, I am done with all of this. And to be completely honest with you, it all happened like within a few weeks of each other to where I was able to quit the mission and to, um, file for divorce and separate from my first wife. And I think that was the initial point that I finally felt like I was free. So I had lived like the last 20 some years in a mental captivity where it was always something that I was subject to. But that was the point where I finally felt free and knew that I could spread my wings and fly, that there were bigger things that I could possibly do with my life.
What was the difference maker for you in you breaking that hamster wheel cycle? And where is it that some people get stuck and they can never break free from addiction?
It's hard. I mean, so it's a multitude of things, right? I think you probably understand we're creatures of habit as humans, and it's hard to break those habits. And then you compound on it the duality of likely mental addiction to what you're doing. But in some cases, with stuff like alcohol, heroin, oxys, Vicodin, there's a physical component to where the withdrawal from that could even be up to lethal coming off of it. So there's a little bit of like, well, it's going to be painful physically when I stop doing these things. It's definitely going to be painful emotionally because I'm going to have feelings again. You don't have feelings when you're doing drugs. You don't have time for that. It's just what hustle gets me to the next high. And so I think for a lot of people, it's just like that aversion to change, but really honestly knowing that you're going to have to face a lot of stuff that you probably don't want to have to deal with, but there is no other pathway to getting better and being able to do what you want out of life than facing those demons, most of which that you've created, and be willing to fight them however necessary.
So what are some of the telltale signs that someone is spiraling out of control? If they use something recreationally, or if they, whether in the case of alcohol, or what are some things that you notice that is a commonality for those who are struggling with addiction?
There can be behavioral things like they are not on time to things that they used to be on time for, that the hobbies they had don't excite them, or they show little to no interest in them anymore. They're less reliable, right? Like you ask them to do something and you start to hear more like, oh man, I totally forgot. Well, I didn't forget. I knew I had to do it, but I would rather get drunk or high instead. And then there can be physical things. A lot of cases, it can be weight loss. I went from probably near 200 pounds to 135 pounds by time I got to the rescue mission. So there's some things, do they smell? Have we stopped taking care of ourselves? It can be all those little things and sometimes big things like that we can use as signals to try to identify, like, is someone, also, are they stealing from you, right? If your stuff ends up like stolen and you don't know where it's happened, and Jack was the last guy who was over here, and now that thing's gone, and you've been a little bit suspicious about him because he doesn't seem like the same guy he was in years prior. Like, those are all the things, some very obvious, some very not, that can be signs of someone who's really starting to struggle with something.
is in they're in their career and they're really struggling to keep it together. And how would you know what's the difference between somebody struggling and then someone who suddenly develops an addiction, but they've got a big role in their career and their company, in any of those examples?
And this is a good time for me to be vulnerable too, because I think a lot of times people like myself, and I went into a corporate-ish world after the rescue mission, and that's where I always envisioned myself, was being a slave to the system and just trying to make as much money as possible by any means necessary, which is a very unhealthy behavior to have. But that those are drug addiction is like sex addiction, is like food addiction. Those are all really like level 2 bosses, as I like to refer to them. I've just come to realize within the last year that I have a performance addiction. That's my super boss. You know what I mean? That's the end of game character that I have to try to defeat. And all of those things are just related to that performance addiction. But first and foremost, I was addicted to something to fill that hole, which for me, years later, you come to find out is probably the fact that I didn't get to have a normal childhood. And I've collected wrestling toys, sports cards, wrestling memorabilia, you name it. Whatever I do, it's a million miles an hour into a brick wall. And I see that because these executives who are going through this type of uh, life cycle, those are my people, because that's who I wanted to be. I know how to talk to them, and it's very difficult to get inside their mind because they're in an unenviable position. Most of the companies and most of the people who go into this walk of life have to be supremely competitive. But there's also an understanding that, like, if I make one misstep, there are 10 people behind me that want to walk away with my head and take what I've worked so hard to achieve. So you have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing to try to stay on top of your game. And that leads to burnout, and it is a symptomatic and emblematic of that performance addiction that we fall victim to. So I'm going to tell you right now, the hardest thing that I sometimes have to explain to people who are in positions of power is you are messing up. Whether everything on the outside looks good or not, you're putting yourself in a position where the dominoes are going to fall. And if the dominoes fall and you're not the one who raises your hand first and says, I need help, you're gone, right? And that's going to be that's almost likely to be the result anyway. You have to start asking yourself these questions. Was the place I was at a really good place if I'm going through something and I don't feel like I could raise my hand and say, hey, I need help, I need to take a time out, or else I'm not going to be able to give what is necessary to give to not just your company, but the people in my life who are important. You hear the stories all the time about the executives who burn out, and they've spent years away from their families and they have no relationships with their children. Is that something you really want to be 80 years old and saying, yeah, I was CEO of such and such and made a bunch of money, but my kids hate me and I'm 3 times divorced? Like, is that a great life to live? I don't think so.
So what were some things that helped you elevate self-care to where it did become a priority? So obviously being mindful of your addiction recovery being number one, but then how did you know, or what helped you to consistently take care of yourself in a way that you didn't do before?
Well, I got fat, and I always carry weight well because I'm 6'5" and broad. So weight sits differently on me. Like, I'm in pretty good shape now, but I'm still 250 pounds. I'm not a light guy. But I was at one point probably near 315, 320. I had size 44 pants that I sadly just recently threw away. I wasn't wearing them still, but I mean, I had them. I just hadn't cleaned out my closet in enough time. So for me, there was a health scare where I kept getting my blood pressure taken at the mission when they had like social workers and people come in from the hospital. And it was always like really high, like 180s. And I was just like, whatever, I haven't done this in a while, or I just ate something bad. So that was probably what it was. But my diet was out of control. I was eating only fried food because basically the only money I had, went to rent and stuff, I couldn't really afford to eat well. So I ate what was at the Mission, fried food. And I went from 135 pounds to almost 300 pounds in like 9 months, like it was a very quick transition. One day I was at work and I stood up and I felt like my body just kept going. Like I felt like I was having an out of body experience, and I couldn't regulate that. Like I kept feeling like I was floating 6 feet above my body. And so finally I called someone to come into me, and I went to the emergency room, and I was like 215 over 140. And they were like, "You are at like stroke level, dude. You need to do something." And that was kind of like the first hint that I needed to start to make some changes in my life. So I'm hard-headed. You would think like you end up at a homeless shelter, you'd look at the big picture. Like I need to make sure every facet of my life is optimized as possible so that I stay away from all of those things. But that wasn't it. I didn't have that like recognition. And so I fell into a bad path with food, and it almost killed me.
We've got more to cover. First, we're going to take a break. Stay right there. We're coming back.
Welcome to Renew Laser and Skincare, where beauty meets technology. From laser hair removal and anti-aging treatments to facial sculpting, acne care, and injectables, our expert team helps you look and feel your best with customized, results-driven care. Located in Littleton, Colorado, we offer a comfortable, welcoming space and cutting-edge treatments tailored just for you. Visit renewlaserandskincare.com to book your transformation today. Renew Laser and Skincare, where confidence begins.
Hi, I'm Adriana, and welcome to Fit Bites. Did you know that 67% of the workforce sits for 4 hours or more at a time? Sitting for long periods can take a toll on your body, increasing the risk of back pain, poor posture, weight gain, and even serious conditions like heart disease and diabetes. The solution? Move more. Stand up every 30 minutes and take a quick stretch or walk around. Incorporate simple desk exercises like seated leg lifts or shoulder rolls to keep your muscles active. Even standing while on phone calls or using a standing desk can make a big difference. Now, when you have time, add movement into your day with brisk walks, yoga, or strength training. Now, these activities can counteract the negative effects of sitting and improve your overall health. Remember, small changes add up. Your body is designed to move, so break up those long sitting sessions and stay active throughout your day. Stay tuned for more Fit Bites with Adriana.
Welcome back, everybody. We've been spending quality time with our guest today, Nick Volinchak. He is a motivational speaker. We are talking about his resilience, his comeback story from overcoming addiction. And Nick, before the break, you were talking about how that there were certain telltale signs that made it clear of the things that you wanted and that you didn't want. You talked about how embracing the different areas of corporate life, but also it gave clarity with where the steps that you're going. Can you share three simple tasks that someone can do if they're struggling with addiction and they want recovery? What are three things that they can do today that can get them going in the right direction?
First and foremost has to be ask for help. I am happy that we're entering a new cycle, especially for males, because 20 years ago, you couldn't raise your hand, or it felt you would be looked at as weak if you raised your hand and said, I need help. I can't do this. So I'm happy that we've embraced mental health a lot more and mental well-being to the point where we can ask for help. There are very few people who can manage addiction by themselves. If you don't have a support and a community there when times get tough, that's why people go back to the thing that they were doing before, because nobody is there to hold their hand and say, hey, not now, not ever. So that's the first thing. Second thing is you have to develop a good relationship with one person, and it's often neglected, and it's yourself, right? At the end of the day, we are our own worst enemies, but we could also be our own best friend. So if we're just willing to take the time to talk to ourselves and have that mental check-in with ourselves, how are we feeling today? Are we feeling aloof? Are we feeling cantankerous? How do you feel and what do you do about it? And so that's where that community can come into play. But it's also okay to say, hey, I'm doing really well today and I'm happy about that. And I'm really proud about that. Third, every single human being should have a journal. One of the most impactful books I've ever read in my life is The Heroin Diaries by Nikki Sixx, which he wrote in the closet while he was shooting heroin. So he was keeping a journal of what it was like. And it should be mandatory reading for anyone in the addiction space, whether you're an addict or you're serving people with addictions. But I think it helps get those thoughts out on paper. And when you can look at them and think through it, oftentimes it can stop you from making a really bad decision.
On different platforms, and you've shared your message with others. What's some of the feedback you've gotten from those who have been in that audience, who've heard you speak and you be so candid about your life?
I get that I'm willing to be vulnerable and abundantly human. I think vulnerability is when someone is willing to show that they're vulnerable, it makes other people willing to be vulnerable themselves. And a lot of times people are in that state where they're just like, it can go one way or another. And if they don't do something about the problem that they're having, things can go off the rail quickly. So I know that people have come up to me and have said, something you said made me think about where I'm at, and I'm either going to get help or I know that I have to start working hard on this thing and take it seriously, because if not, the consequences could be grave. And so that's why I want to do what I want to do, to hear people say something you said made a difference. Working with people for 10 years and then not working with people for 10 years left a void in my soul, right? And that's why I'm coming back, and I really have a heart to be a servant to help those people who really need the help.
So not only that being how you spread your message, but also you do have a podcast, and I do want to talk about how you've used your platforms, and we're going to bring up a slide of the microshift and talk a little bit about this, and talk a little bit about just your website, the space that you represent.
Yeah, it's a podcast where I can, the first 10 are really just me talking through my life and things that are important about me so that people can get an understanding of who I am, where I'm from, and what I want to do and accomplish. Now I'm in the process of working through people who have either gone through addiction or some kind of trauma in their life and have figured out coping mechanisms and how to deal with life on life's terms. And I think that's what I really enjoy, is hearing other people's aha moments. Because listen, you do battle. Life is a battle, and you're constantly using a sword. If you don't take time to pause and sharpen that sword, it's going to go dull and it's not going to work as well as it used to. So being able to hear other people's perspectives and new tips and trades on how to deal with problems has been as impactful for me as I feel like it has probably been for some of the people who have heard what we were talking about.
So where can we find the podcast?
Well, I'm everywhere. I know that's really kind of corny to say, but I made sure that, it's distributed through Spotify, Apple Music, all of the major platforms that I know of. It's posted on YouTube regularly. I like to post a lot of shorts. I am going to be doing more non-podcast related addiction specific content, because I think that's really where the bulk of my audience is. And I want to speak to those people who need it the most.
And what are you noticing in terms of the conversations that are most helpful for others, for those who have that are struggling with addiction? What are some elements that help to cultivate and to help support the right conversation? This is for anyone who suspects that they've got a loved one or someone that they care about that is struggling with addiction, potential addiction.
Yeah, I think it's just having a diverse population of people coming in and being able to hear stories from different walks of life. Listen, when I talk through my stories to normals, that's what I call, regular people, they look at me and they're kind of like face upside down and they're like, wow, that is a lot of crazy stuff. And we didn't, it would take me hours to go through all of the crazy, wild, illegal things that I did. Well, this summer, I became infatuated with Chicago drill music, which this conversation has now just taken a wild turn. I'm talking about things like Lil Durk, King Von, L.A. Capone. And I've watched hundreds of hours of documentaries because I'm fascinated, because you hear them tell their stories and you're like, oh my God, I have stories, they have stories. And you start to realize that if I told them my stories, no impact whatsoever. If someone in their area hears their stories and how they wish they hadn't gone through that stuff, there is such a greater likelihood that that is going to impact that person's life. So being able to bring people on who don't just look like me, who don't just talk like me, who don't have the same background I have, I think variety being the spice of life really gives an opportunity for a well-rounded audience who's all going through the same struggle to find someone that they truly, really identify with.
Very powerful. We're going to take a quick commercial break. Stay right there. Welcome back, everybody. We've been spending time talking about the comeback story from addiction recovery. Nick Volinchak is our guest today. Nick, one more time, where can our viewing audience find you in the virtual space?
Well, most of my usernames are at Nick from CWE. I think TikTok, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn if you want to connect on LinkedIn. I know there's a huge audience of people here from LinkedIn, probably. Nicholas Volinchak. You could see the name spelled various points through this pod at the bottom. And my podcast on YouTube as at the Microshift. I opted not to use my last name because, believe it or not, it's hard to spell, and I didn't want to make it difficult for people to find me.
And I do have one last question for you. What kind of mark do you wish to leave in the world?
I want people to be able to point to things where I materially contributed to the betterment of society. I think I have very big philanthropical goals. I would love to be able to do something around cancer or Christmas, which was a huge thing my mom loved, and be able to put my mom's name on it. I'd love to be able to attach all of the people who have helped me in one way or another and be able to show homage to them and just really better my community. I was blessed to have a mentor who was probably the top philanthropist in our area, and I would love to be able to carry on that legacy.
Well, it's an incredible goal, and you're already on that path, and we certainly appreciate you sharing your insight and your vulnerability and just your story. Nick Volinchak, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me. And anytime we want to talk again, I'd be game for it. And I wish you the best of luck in everything you do.
I love that. And for all our viewing audience, we just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors. We appreciate their support. That's very important to us. Biomed Mobile IV, Dapper No Code, Launchpad, Renew Laser and Skincare, Synergize Fitness. And we are also on the web. Our website is thehealthrevolutiontv.com. There you can sign up for our newsletter. You can email us with any show episode ideas you'd love for us to cover. In the corner of your screen, you'll see our QR code. If it's easy to grab, feel free to do so as a crow flies. And then as always, you can count on us to be there for you every Tuesday and Thursday on the Arion TV channel on E360 TV, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, and all the ever expanding distribution hubs. That is all the time that we have for today. Until next time, take care of yourselves. We will see you soon.